Shalom. I want to give all praises and honor and glory to the only true God of heaven and earth, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Israel, whose true name is Yahweh, and to his only begotten Son, the Messiah, the Lamb of God, that taketh away the sins of Israel by the shedding of his own blood, whose true name is Yahweh Shai, whom the world ignorantly calls Jesus. And double honors to my elders and teachers, and great millstone, and honors to all the prophets and teachers that carry the spirit of faith and the spirit of truth within them. My name is Zechariah. Hear my speech concerning the truth that is the word of the living God, which word pertains to you Israelites, which are you so-called Negroes, Hispanics, Latinos, and Native Indians, even you Israelites, who may have the appearance of the heathen, who may have the identity of the heathen, are really descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And your faith is a evidence of you possibly being an elect and of you being an Israelite. Because the spirit of Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai, by way of the prophets, by way of the apostles of old, testified of the faith of the election, on how the just shall live by faith, on how faith is gathered like a treasure by the saints of the Most High. So your faith becomes a sign, an evidence that the Spirit beareth witness with, or beareth witness to, because the Word is Spirit. Now, I wanted to talk about this new development of technology that ICE agents, in different schools in Nebraska are using, such as gloves that are able to shock, called, shock gloves, gloves that is able to deliver harm, that is able to be used in combat. And it shows you the direction that this kingdom is moving towards. And you Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Hispanics, Latinos, and Native Indians are going to suffer the most, because it is prophesied by the prophets of Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai that there will be a time of trouble, a time of sorrow, a time of death. And the instrument, or the very source of these things, will be Esau himself, being the one delivering these sorrows, these evils upon the people, whether it be a controlled famine or controlled famine. Damn. That but yeah, Esau, he have his agendas, his initiatives that will ultimately lead to the depopulation of many people, the suffering of many people. And part of that would be a draconian measure, military lethal force, and the use of these different technologies, and, and military mobilization against you, the people, the widows, the fatherless, the poor, the needy, you Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Hispanics, Latinos, Native Indians, and this is a time that is coming, a term that could be, you know, uh, said is what martial law, you know, right? But, it's prophetic, it's according to the wrath of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai. Now, these shock gloves that ICE agents are moving to use, they're called shock gloves, taser gloves, whatever. They're being rolled out to all ICE agents, and it is being expected to be put in use. So Esau, he's building technology to, you know, to run you jakes down, right? But, when I seen this, it reminded me of Revelation chapter 20, where it speaks about how, or it applies on how there's going to be some who will be beheaded or decapitated for the faith, for Yahweh Shai's sake, for the gospel's sake, by way of persecution. They will be beheaded for the faith. Now, we speculate that the instruments that's going to be used by these Edomites, by these soldiers, by the government, by this rulership, will be guillotines. You know, so if they're putting technology in these taser gloves, the time shall come where they will possibly put. It's like if they're putting resources and and money for these taser gloves, the time shall come where they're going to direct resources for guillotines. And the thing is, they don't need guillotines. They could do it the old-fashioned way. But we speculate, that guillotines will be, a method used by this rulership in these last days against the people, but primarily against the church of Yahweh Bashim Yahweh Shai, the church of Yahweh Shai. This prophetic, time where the saints will be beheaded. Some, not all, but some in these last days. Just showing you that they're putting resources in these different things. They may soon put resources in guillotines, Um, let's get the book of Isaiah real quick. And I'm gonna just, this is gonna be a short lesson, Isaiah chapter 32, verse 6. It says, for fools, this is the NIV translation. It says, for fools speak folly, their heart are bent on evil, they practice ungodliness and spread error concerning the Lord. The hungry they leave empty, and from the thirsty they withhold water. Scoundrels use wicked methods, so the time shall come where they're going to bring out, the technology, used to destroy, used for war, used for combat, you know, used to destroy, you know. This is they make you think about these flock cameras, these flock cameras, Palantir technology, all these different things, evil, for an evil purpose, you know. So, I'm gonna end it all with that. I just want to, touch on this thing. Lord will I be able to touch on it tomorrow because I'm limited because it's nighttime. I don't want to, really, speak, loud. So I feel limited. Lord will I be able to touch on this again tomorrow. I'm gonna give all praise and honor and glory to Yahweh Bashim, Yahweh Shai Bashim, Ruach Badash Shalom.